The alien goddess in chains said I could free her, but only if I promised to stay with her forever. Welcome to the world of science fiction. Comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. I wasn't supposed to find the map. It was lodged deep in the wreckage of a ship, so ancient the metal had fused into the surrounding asteroid. The salvage crew ignored it, too focused on plasma cores and broken weapons. But I've always been more interested in old stories than scrap value. When I pried open the compartment and saw the obsidian tablet inside, etched with symbols that shimmered faintly even in vacuum, I knew I was looking at something no historian had ever recorded. I brought it aboard my skiff, powered up the translation drone, and waited. The message unraveled slowly. It spoke of a temple hidden beneath a dead star, guarded by a vault and buried so deep that even light dared not return. At the end was a phrase I couldn't ignore. Within lies she who waits, chained by betrayal, burning with love and rage. Most people would have flagged it as a trap or some ancient war legend. But I wasn't most people. I had no family, no obligations, and no reason not to chase myths. So I plotted a course to the star system the text pointed to, a place marked on most maps with a warning, dead zone. I expected silence, maybe ancient ruins. I didn't expect what I found. The system was a graveyard. The sun at its center was more black hole than star, its collapsed gravity warping everything around it into cold spirals. My ship shields groaned just coasting through the orbiting debris, but then I saw it, a planet somehow still holding shape covered in jagged obsidian and veins of glowing crystal. I dropped into the atmosphere, guided only by the coordinates burned into the tablet. The air was breathable, barely. Radiation tickled the back of my throat like static. Everything here felt wrong and sacred at the same time. I found the temple buried beneath a mountain of jagged stone. It wasn't built into the mountain, it was the mountain. Its surface pulsed faintly with energy as if veins ran under the skin of the world. I followed the carvings through a narrow canyon, then down into darkness. My gear failed halfway down. Lanterns flickered, boots lost magnetic grip, and even my comlink crackled with whispers I knew weren't mine. But I kept going. Eventually I came to a door. No key, no lock, just a wall of shimmering force that responded to my presence like a living thing. When I reached toward it, it parted, not like glass breaking, but like water rippling around my hand. The chamber beyond was vast, carved out of the planet's crystal core. Pillars taller than skyscrapers supported a dome inlaid with golden constellations I didn't recognize. At the center of the room, she hung in the air, chained, floating, glowing with power that made my bones itch. She was massive, not grotesquely tall, but powerful in a way that made the air tremble around her. Her skin was deep midnight blue, like the vacuum between stars, with golden veins pulsing across her arms and chest in patterns that danced with each breath. Her hair, black and wild, floated around her like a storm cloud barely contained. Her horns curled backward in perfect symmetry, sharp and regal, and her eyes, when they opened, were like twin novus locked behind glass. I froze. She didn't. "Another supplicant," she said, her voice a mix of melody and thunder. "Another thief, another coward." I raised my hands, backing away, my instincts screaming. But then her expression changed, her voice softened. "You're not like the others." "I came because of the map," I managed to say. "The message said you were waiting." "I have waited," she whispered. 10,000 years, maybe more. I lost count. They left me here, sealed me beneath this husk of a world while they fed lies to the stars. "Who are you?" Her laugh was soft and bitter. "Once I was called Annabella, a guardian, a queen, a weapon. They feared me, so they locked me away, said I would bring ruin, but I only ever wanted to protect what was mine." I took a cautious step closer, trying not to let awe turn into stupidity. "Why leave a map?" "To see if anyone would come," she said, "to see if anyone still could." "And what happens if I free you?" Her golden gaze locked onto mine, sudden and sharp. "You must promise to stay with me, forever. That is the price. I frowned. Why? Because I cannot bear solitude again, she said, and her voice cracked in a way that no power could hide. I can survive pain, betrayal, even imprisonment, but not the silence, not again. I looked at the chains. They weren't metal. They were like light, but solid interwoven symbols burned into the air. I could feel their hum under my skin. I didn't understand the full weight of her story, but something in her voice made it real, something broken, lonely, defiant. You don't even know me, I said quietly. I know your eyes, she replied. They didn't look away. That shook me. She wasn't trying to seduce me. She wasn't pleading. She was being honest, and that was far more terrifying. She meant to keep the promise sacred. I could have walked away. I probably should have, but my whole life I'd wandered between ruins and relics, never belonging anywhere. No one ever needed me. No one ever asked me to stay. I looked up at her, this impossible goddess, chained by time and treachery, and felt the weight of her loneliness like it was my own. I promised, I said. I'll stay. The vault shuddered. The chains groaned. Her eyes widened not with glee but with something else, relief and maybe fear. Then with a sound like stars colliding, the binding snapped. The sound of the chains breaking wasn't just noise. It was pressure, a force that punched through the chamber, knocked dust loose from ancient carvings, and made my vision blur like gravity had been turned sideways. Annabella dropped, didn't fall, but landed with intention. Her bare feet struck the stone floor with a gentle thud, and the glow from her veins surged like a heartbeat. She straightened, towering over me, arms loose at her sides, power radiating from her body like silent lightning. For a second, neither of us moved. She just breathed, her first breath as a free being in what might have been 10 millennia. I saw the corners of her eyes glisten, then harden as the light of her body dimmed slightly and steadied into control. She was suppressing something, rage, sorrow, I wasn't sure, but I stayed rooted true to my word. You did it, she said quietly. Her voice still echoed, but now it sounded alive, not rehearsed, not trapped behind layers of control. She turned to me fully, eyes piercing through my thoughts, and you kept your promise. I said I'd stay, I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. Still here. She took a step toward me, not threatening, not seductive, just curious. Her golden irises narrowed slightly. You're trembling. I hadn't noticed. The energy in the room was making my legs unsteady, the static in the air, the weight of her presence. It wasn't something the human nervous system was built to endure, but I steadied myself. You're a walking nuclear storm, I muttered. Give me a second. Annabella let out a short, quiet laugh. It was the first soft sound in this world of cold stone and glowing violence. You're not like the others who came, she said. They saw power, tried to control me, they failed, and the vault took them. Vault? I asked, glancing around. She turned her gaze upward, motioning toward the glowing constellations that decorated the ceiling of the chamber. This place is alive in its own way. It was built not to hold me, but to test anyone who came here for me. You passed, not because you're strong, but because you listened. Before I could respond, the chamber shifted. Literally, the floor trembled, cracks spiraling outward from where she had stood chained. The golden carvings pulsed angrily, and I heard a low, deep hum building all around us. Her eyes darted to the far wall. It's collapsing. It was never meant to be unsealed. Once the power flows again, the old world will notice. Notice what? That I'm free. That answer chilled me in a way no collapsing ceiling ever could. Whatever we'd just done, it wasn't just personal. It had lit a beacon in the void. She grabbed my hand. Her skin was warm, almost too warm, but not burning. It wasn't attraction that made my chest clench. It was her urgency. She wasn't dragging me to escape danger. She was holding on like I was the last real thing left in the galaxy. Without another word, she pulled me toward a passage that hadn't been there before, revealed by the shifting walls. The temple had changed, reshaped itself to let us out. We sprinted through the corridor, her strides longer than mine, but perfectly in sync. The deeper we went, the stranger it became. Light bled from the walls, not as glow, but impulses like breathing. I could feel thoughts brushing against the edges of my mind. Not words, not commands, just a presence, something ancient watching us leave. We burst into a tunnel that twisted upward at an impossible angle. Gravity felt unreliable. My boots slipped once on smooth crystal, and Annabella caught me easily, gripping my waist like I weighed nothing. "Almost there," she said, glancing upward. "We'll breach the crust soon." "The crust of a planet," I gasped. "What is this place?" "It was a prison carved into the bones of a dying world," she said, barely out of breath. "A place forgotten by all, built by cowards who feared what they didn't understand." I had 1,000 questions, but the tunnel narrowed, and the golden light faded as we reached a massive slab of opaque stone. Annabella pressed her palm to it, and the wall rippled like water. Beyond was the surface, skyless, starless, just black space overhead, and crystal dust swirling across jagged plains. The stars above us were faint, distant but present. The dead sun loomed behind thick clouds, a black sphere where light curled but never escaped. I staggered out, sucking air that felt heavier than before, my lungs adjusting again to the strange pressure. Annabella stood tall, her body glowing softly in the alien moonlight. Her eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened again, I saw something different in them. Grief. She turned slowly in a full circle, scanning the landscape. "It's all gone," she whispered. "Even the sky has forgotten me." I didn't know what to say. What could you say to a god who had been erased from history? She didn't wait long. "We have to keep moving. They'll come. You keep saying they— Who are they?" She stepped toward me, and her tone changed from sorrow to warning. "The ones who built the chains, the ones who ascended and declared themselves the sole gods of the sector. When they feel my absence, they will hunt me to maintain their illusion of order, and they'll come for you because you helped me." "I'm not important," I muttered, trying to shake the cold from my limbs. "To me you are," she said with no hesitation, "and to them, that's enough." I scanned the horizon, no ships yet, no movement, just crystalline cliffs and alien wind. My ship parked a few kilometers west, assuming the auto defenses didn't cook it while we were down there. She nodded. "Then we go." We started walking, the strange terrain crunching beneath our boots. Every few steps I glanced sideways at her, not just because she glowed like a living constellation, but because I felt like I was walking beside someone both ancient and heartbreakingly lonely. She wasn't boasting or lording her power over me. She was quiet, measured, and even as she looked ahead, I could feel that part of her was still chained, somewhere deep. I finally said what I'd been thinking since the vault. "You really would have stayed in there forever if no one came, wouldn't you?" She didn't look at me, just nodded once. "Yes." "Why didn't you lie to me, trick me?" She turned to me then. Her expression was solemn, proud, a little sad, because I didn't want another servant. I wanted someone who would choose me. We kept walking, and somewhere behind us the ground shook. The vault was gone, buried forever, but whatever we'd started, whatever I had agreed to, it was only just beginning. By the time we reached the valley ridge, the sky had started to crackle with colorless lightning, silent streaks that split the atmosphere like nerves exposed under pressure. The wind was sharper now, laced with static that tugged at my skin. The terrain was more jagged here, brittle under our boots, like a crust of glass left behind by an old planetary wound. My ship's beacon pinged weakly just beyond the next rise, but even before I saw it, I could smell the ozone burn in the air, the scent of energy discharge and plasma scoring. Annabella slowed as we reached the top of the ridge. She didn't need to say anything. The ship was there, but it wasn't intact. Its frame had been split open like a ribcage, internal systems exposed, flickering and sparking as if a precision strike had flayed it open, not exploded, not melted, surgically removed from the equation. I moved slowly toward it, my mind refusing to panic. The survival packs might still be intact, the long-range comms doubtful. My fingers touched the hull warm still from the recent attack, but there were no burn marks. No craters, just silence. Something had found it, something that didn't want me leaving. "They're fast," I muttered, anger grinding against the base of my throat. I was only gone a few hours. "They've always been fast when motivated," Annabella said from behind me. "They monitor the dead stars, not for worship, for fear. They feared the day my chains would break." I turned to face her, trying not to let the frustration boil over. "Then we're stranded." "For now," she said simply, eyes scanning the horizon again. "But we're not alone anymore. They sent scouts. I feel them circling." I frowned. "I don't see." "They ride cloaked crafts," she said, "mechanical angels with knives for wings. They're watching us now, waiting to see if I'm truly free or if this is some accident of circumstance. Once they confirm it's real, they'll bring fire." She said it like it was the weather, not panicked, just certain. I paced for a second, trying to piece together the plan from the scraps of options we had left. No ship, no weapons, limited supplies, a goddess beside me who could level a mountain but was still shaking off 10,000 years of dormancy. "All right," I said. "Then we need shelter, somewhere out of sight, somewhere we can plan." Annabella nodded. "There is an old temple, a broken one, less than a day's walk. It was part of the binding network, but they abandoned it after my imprisonment. It may still stand." She walked ahead, trusting I follow, and I did. The planet beneath our feet was strange, dry and scarred, but every few kilometers we'd passed something unnatural. A spiral pattern etched into the stone. An obelisk broken at the center with symbols half erased by time. It wasn't a natural world. It was built, or grown, around her prison, and forgotten only when the architects became too afraid to revisit it. The deeper we moved into its wild regions, the more I understood how thoroughly they tried to bury her existence. We rested once in the shadow of a shattered spire. She didn't sleep, but she sat cross-legged with her eyes half closed, her glowing veins dimmed to a gentle flicker. I shared a protein bar with her, and she inspected it like a rare gem before nibbling the edge. Her expression twisted. "You eat this by choice." "Only when stranded," I muttered. She actually smiled. That moment more than anything made her real to me. Not a weapon, not a goddess. Just someone experiencing the strange new universe she'd awoken into. I asked her something that had been gnawing at me since the vault. "Back there, when you asked me to stay, why me? Why not wait for someone stronger or smarter or more divine?" She opened her eyes fully then, and the smile faded. "Because you didn't try to use me, you didn't flinch when you saw me, you didn't ask for power, you asked for truth, and I've had millennia to imagine who might one day find me. Out of every dream, every possible face, yours was the only one that didn't come with chains. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't." We kept walking. By nightfall, though the dead sun never truly set, we found the ruin she mentioned. It was less temple and more graveyard of architecture, scattered across a sunken plain surrounded by jagged cliffs. Most of the structure had collapsed inward, but a sub-level beneath the rubble still glowed faintly, protected by layers of ancient shielding that buzzed when we passed through. Inside, it smelled like dust and forgotten voltage. Screens flickered to life as Annabella entered, responding to her presence with something like reverence. Symbols lit up the floor. She traced them with her fingers, drawing a path to a long dead console that sputtered to life under her touch. "Still remembers me," she whispered. More to herself than to me. I watched her closely. The way she moved wasn't like someone retaking a throne. It was more like someone returning to a place they once loved but were forced to abandon. She ran her hands across the console, downloading raw data from crystal cores, reading ancient communications in languages I couldn't translate. Her face grew darker with each one. I stepped forward. "What is it?" She looked at me, pain etched across her features. They erased everything, not just me, every record, every city that worshipped me, every name tied to my reign. I am a footnote in their mythology now if I exist at all. "Then we change that," I said. "You're free now. You're not alone. You have me." Her expression shifted, not to joy, not to hope, but to something steadier, trust. She reached out, touched my chest lightly with the tips of her fingers. Then we begin again. We spent the rest of the night powering up the vault's defenses just in case. She slept for the first time in the smallest room. No throne, no shrine, just a padded surface in silence. I watched her for a long time before finally lying down, exhaustion taking hold. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew I wouldn't be running. I'd promised to stay. And now, for the first time in years, staying felt like something I wanted, not something I owed. The silence that followed our first night in the ruins wasn't peaceful. It was taut, still, the kind of stillness that usually comes right before something terrible drops out of the sky. Annabella rose before me, standing at the threshold of the outer chamber, her outline lit by flickering glyphs carved into the ceiling above. I didn't say anything right away. She looked like a statue waiting for judgment, unmoving but alert, her gaze trained on the jagged horizon beyond the fractured dome. When I finally joined her, she didn't turn. She just spoke in a tone too calm for what she said. "They're coming." I didn't need to ask who. The words were thick with meaning, the ones she spoke of, the ones who had built the chains erased her from memory and now hunted her in silence. I followed her gaze, scanning the upper atmosphere for movement, anything unnatural. The stars above the dead sun had shifted slightly, unnaturally, like they were being bent. As I stared, something shimmered, a ripple, a fold in the sky like heat over metal. My heart jumped. "Cloaked?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded. They always were, even before they betrayed me. I stepped back into the ruin and yanked open my emergency satchel, pulling out what little I could use, a pulse sensor with a cracked screen, a single-shot flare pistol, and a comlink that still spat static. I offered the sensor to her, then hesitated. "Wait, you can sense them already. Why would you need?" She took it gently from my hand and placed it aside. "Because you're still thinking like a human, like someone outmatched. You're not with me." She said it without arrogance. It was fact. But even facts didn't calm the pounding in my chest. I knew I wasn't built for battle. I was a historian, a scavenger, a quiet mind with an itch for secrets, not firefights. But still, I stayed. Not because I was brave, because I'd promised, because something in her presence made the idea of running feel smaller than any danger we faced. The moment cracked when the sky split with a streak of light. A shape descended fast, too fast to be a ship dropping through orbit the usual way. It was a blade of obsidian wrapped in golden flame, stabbing toward the valley with surgical precision. It didn't crash. It landed. And the moment it touched ground, the air changed. A high piercing frequency began to pulse outward in waves. Annabella exhaled slowly, then turned to me with steel in her voice. "That's one of their judgment vessels. It's not here to talk. It's here to test me, to see if I'm still what I was." "Are you?" I asked before I could stop myself. She looked at me then, not offended, not wounded. "I don't know, but I'll find out." Without waiting for my approval, she moved toward the open plain, her body glowing brighter with every step. The veins across her arms and shoulders shimmered gold, and even the wind around her began to bend as if the air itself remembered her. I followed, but slower, keeping behind the debris and stone columns. The vessel stood like a dagger planted upright, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Then it opened. A figure stepped out, tall, clad in ivory armor that shimmered with unnatural perfection. Its face a blank mask with only a single blue slit across the visor. "Annabella of the Old Flame," it intoned. The voice echoed too far for a normal speaker. "You were not summoned. You were not permitted. You are a fracture in the archive. Return to containment or be erased." Annabella stopped walking and planted her feet. "Containment broke because your lies couldn't hold forever." The figure tilted its head, mechanical and precise. "You are incomplete. You are unstable. You are incompatible with the new directive." "I'm still more than enough for you," she replied. The machine raised an arm. Light formed at its palm, a sphere of pooling white energy, silent but charged with the power to vaporize cities. I reached for the flare gun, foolish I knew, but I couldn't watch without doing something. Annabella raised her hand, matching its gesture. Her glow intensified. The moment held frozen in tension until the machine fired. The beam ripped across the plain with a crack that echoed through the cliffs, tearing up stone and crystal as it went. Annabella met it with her palm. Not a shield, not a counterblast, just her hand. The beam struck, and for a moment it looked like she would vanish in the explosion, but the light twisted, bent, curled around her like water flowing past a stone. The energy dispersed behind her in chaotic spirals. The ground shook. The machine reeled slightly as if recalibrating its understanding of physics. Then Annabella walked through the aftermath, golden sparks falling from her fingertips like embers. "You never understood me," she said, her voice cutting clear through the wind. "You feared me because I didn't need to dominate to be powerful. You erased me because I didn't beg." The machine didn't answer. It fired again, 3 rapid bursts. This time she didn't block them. She dodged. Moving in a blur that defied momentum, she closed the distance and struck its chest with an open palm. There was no explosion, no drama, just silence followed by the collapse of its frame as if it had been hollow all along. The ivory armor crumpled, the blue slit flickering and dying. She stood over at a moment, then turned back to me. I approached cautiously, stepping over the still smoking shell of the defeated construct. That was one of the scouts. She nodded. "They'll send more stronger. That was a test, a signal. The real judgment comes next." I didn't argue. I just looked at her, glowing brighter now, like she'd reawakened a part of herself in that fight. She seemed taller, steadier, like gravity obeyed her instead of the other way around. "We need to move," I said. "This place isn't safe anymore." She reached for my hand again. "There's a place they won't look, a place even they fear. It's where I learned to command my power." I hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "Then let's go." As we walked into the wilderness beyond the ruins, I felt the first real shift, not in the world but in her. She wasn't just regaining her strength, she was remembering who she was, and I was no longer just the one who freed her. I was becoming something else, not a witness, not a follower, a partner, and I knew if I was going to stay, I couldn't just keep up. I'd have to rise with her. The place she led us to didn't exist on any star chart or buried archive. It wasn't marked, wasn't labeled, wasn't referenced in any fragment of alien scripture I'd ever studied. And yet, the moment we passed the ridge and saw the massive ravine stretching across the earth like a wound stitched with light, I understood. This was not a location, it was a scar. Something powerful had happened here, long before either of us arrived, and something just as powerful had been left behind. The cliffs surrounding it were black glass, not stone, melted and cooled by unimaginable heat. Vines clung to them anyway, crawling across the sheer surfaces like they were trying to choke the memory from the terrain. Below us, faint pulses of gold shimmered through the cracks in the ravine floor. It was like the planet was breathing. Annabella stopped at the edge, her face calm, but I could see the way her fingers twitched slightly at her sides. She wasn't afraid. She was remembering. "This is where they trained us," she said, voice quiet. "Where they bound our power to their will, we were told it was sacred, that it was a gift, but it was a cage." I didn't interrupt. I just waited. She stepped forward, then began her descent along the winding, fractured path into the ravine. I followed, boots crunching on loose shards of crystal, one wrong step away from sliding to the bottom. The deeper we went, the warmer it got, not with heat, but with energy, like walking into the pulse of a sleeping machine. The air shimmered faintly, and the wind whispered words I couldn't quite hear. The place was alive, a relic of a forgotten power source, or maybe a graveyard for one. Either way, it didn't welcome us. It tolerated her. At the bottom, we found what looked like an altar, not a religious one. This wasn't made for worship. It was a device, A ring of hovering stones locked in perfect rotation above a central platform, glowing with a low hum that vibrated through my bones. She stepped into the circle without hesitation. As soon as her foot touched the platform, the stones stopped spinning. Light erupted from the center and wrapped around her like a cocoon, lifting her into the air. I reached out on instinct but stopped myself. She wasn't in danger. She was unlocking something. Her body lit up not just the veins, but her entire form. Symbols danced across her skin, lines of forgotten code or divine language that responded to the energy around her. She floated there, arms outstretched, head tilted back, her expression not pained but focused. I took a step closer and suddenly the entire ravine lit up. Symbols flared to life across every surface. The cliffs above shimmered, the vines recoiled. Something ancient had just been reawakened, and it was recognizing its master. When the light faded, she landed on her feet. The platform dimmed, but the stones hovered again, slowly spinning once more. She turned to me, her eyes burning brighter than before. "They never took it from me," she said. "They thought they had, but it was only sleeping." I stared at her for a moment, taking in the sight. She wasn't glowing from energy anymore. She was energy. A living conduit, a storm wrapped in flesh and breath. But she didn't look at me with superiority. She looked at me like I still mattered, like I was still hers. Before I could speak, she reached toward the hovering stones. One of them broke formation and floated into her hand. She turned it toward me. It shifted, malleable like liquid stone, and reshaped itself into a curved band. She stepped close, wrapped it around my wrist, and it sealed there with a pulse. "It's a key," she explained. "It links you to me. It lets the world recognize that you're mine, and it means that when they come, they'll know you didn't just stumble into this. You chose it." I looked at the band. It hummed gently, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. What else does it do? Her smile was faint. It protects you, and if I fall, it'll carry my memory. I didn't like the sound of that. I didn't like the way she phrased it, but I didn't argue. Not now. We had more pressing problems. If this place still has power, can we use it? Call for help. Build something to fight back. She nodded slowly. In time, it will take a few days to bring it fully online. The systems were meant to only respond to specific patterns, mine mostly, but they'll adapt to you if I ask them. We made camp there near the altar. For once, we didn't have to keep moving. No judgment vessels, no buzzing of cloaked watchers. The ravine must have been too deep or too masked by its own energy for them to track us here. As I prepared what little food we had left, she sat beside me and stared up at the nightless sky. She seemed less tense now, not relaxed, but less guarded. "Do you miss it?" I asked after a while. "Your old life before the chains." She was quiet for a long time. Then I missed the people, the ones who believed in me before belief became a sin. I miss flying without being hunted, and I miss being able to speak without fear that every word would be twisted into prophecy or rebellion. I watched her eyes as she spoke. There was a weight in them that hadn't been there days ago. She was remembering not just the pain, but the beauty that had been stolen too. "I don't know if I can give you back everything you lost," I said, "but I'm still here if that counts for anything." She looked at me then, really looked. "It counts more than anything." We didn't speak again that night, but we didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was shared, it was understood, and even with an empire about to crash down on our heads, I felt for the first time in my life like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, the air in the ravine had changed, not in temperature or smell, but in feeling, an invisible shift in pressure like something vast had turned its attention toward us. Annabella felt at first. She stood by the altar platform again, her eyes distant, focused, as if listening to a voice carried on frequencies no human could hear. I approached slowly, careful not to break whatever link she was forging. The floating stones now moved faster in their orbit, streaking trails of light behind them, and the entire ravine had begun to hum, Not loud, not violent, but constant like a deep mechanical breath. She looked over her shoulder when I neared and spoke softly like someone speaking in a cathedral. They felt the activation. Somewhere in the divine network, an alert has sounded. I can feel their minds scraping at the edges of this place. Not many, just one. One, I asked, my voice low. You mean one scout? No. She turned fully toward me, her expression unreadable. One of them, the Pantheon, the ones who wear the new masks and call themselves the voice of balance. He was once my brother in the old reign. Now he comes to finish what he started. I didn't like the sound of that. I didn't like the calm in her voice or the stillness in her posture. Something about the way she spoke his presence into reality made it feel more certain than even the ground under our feet. I looked around the ravine again, trying to gauge if the defenses she had awakened could do anything against what was coming. Will this place hold? It was never meant to defend me from him, she said, only to hide me from his guilt. That protection is gone now. So we run. She stepped forward and reached for my wrist, her fingers brushing the stone band she had placed on me days ago. No, we speak. This is not a war yet. It is a reckoning. I didn't argue. I trusted her. But that didn't make it easier when the sky cracked open above us like paper set to flame. There was no ship this time, no construct descending on thrusters or light engines. There was just a figure descending slowly, cloaked in white so brilliant it seemed to suck the color out of the world. He didn't land. He hovered. His presence was wrong in every way, not mechanical, not alive, just designed. Perfect in a way that felt sterile and empty. His face was hidden behind a mask of shifting lines. His voice a harmony of whispers layered on top of one another. Annabella, you have violated your bounds. She didn't flinch. There are no bounds left. You were sealed for the preservation of order, he continued. You were given mercy. That mercy is now forfeit. You sealed me because I loved too freely, because I gave power to those you deemed unworthy. You disrupted the structure. I revealed it for the lie it was. His form flickered for a moment, then solidified. He began to descend toward the ravine floor, and instinctively I stepped in front of her. Stupid, maybe, but I didn't care. He noticed me, his head tilting slightly like a machine analyzing an unexpected variable. This one is human, he said. You tied yourself to something fragile that alone proves your instability. Annabella's voice was ice. He freed me because I asked. He stayed because I matter. That makes him stronger than any of you. Then he will die first. The air shifted, not heat, not wind, just intention. I felt it before I saw it, an invisible thread pulling toward me sharp and absolute, but before it could touch, she stepped in front of me, her palm raised. A burst of golden light erupted outward, cracking the air with a noise like shattering glass. The blast didn't hit him. It bent around him like water around a pillar, but it forced him back a step. And for the first time, I saw him hesitate. You fear me, she said. You always did. That's why you buried me instead of facing me. That's why you never came to see if I survived. But here I am, not broken, not bound, and not alone. He didn't respond. He simply raised his arm and sent a pulse of blinding white energy down toward us. The ravine walls screamed in response, their own dormant defenses surging to life as they absorbed and redirected the blast. Arcs of gold and silver light crisscrossed the sky. I ducked behind the altar, but Annabella stood her ground, her body glowing brighter than I'd ever seen. When the light faded, he hovered still, untouched, but no longer advancing. This is your last chance, he said. Surrender, and the human lives. Resist, and your memory will be erased from time. She looked over her shoulder at me, just a glance, but it was enough. I stepped from behind the altar and stood beside her, shoulders squared, pulse thudding. You said you wanted me to choose. I choose this. I choose you. The god didn't understand it. I could see it in the stillness of his posture. This wasn't part of his logic path. His next move was slow, reluctant. He began to descend further, his energy pulling in around him like a forming storm. And then Annabella spoke one word in a language I didn't know. The ravine responded, the altar flared, the air became thick with symbols and memory. The stones in the circle spun faster and faster until they blurred into a ring of light. Then they exploded outward, not in destruction, but in creation, forming a barrier around us, a sphere of reality tied to her power. And in that moment, I saw her as she truly was, not a prisoner, not a weapon, not even a goddess, just a being made of light and will, protecting the one she had chosen just as I had chosen her. The god hesitated again, then vanished, not in retreat, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. This was not over, but for now he'd seen enough. The sky closed behind him, the wind returned, the light dimmed. Annabella collapsed to her knees, exhausted but smiling faintly. "He saw us," she said, breathless. "He saw us," and he stepped back. I knelt beside her, steadying her shoulders. "He's going to come again." "Yes," she said, "but next time we'll be ready." She slept for the first time in what felt like days, though time had begun to stretch and fold strangely around us. The ravine no longer felt like part of the surface world. It had become its own sealed chamber of energy, a sanctum carved into forgotten systems that obeyed her presence and bent gently toward mine because of the bond she had gifted me. I sat near her as she rested, watching the gold in her veins pulse softly beneath her skin, like embers under the surface of a sleeping forge. Her breathing was steady now, deeper than before, as if the confrontation had drained the final layers of tension that had coiled through her ever since she was freed. There was something vulnerable about her like this, not weak but raw, as though each breath was rebuilding the pieces of herself not just shattered by imprisonment, but by what she'd seen in the eyes of her former kin. That god, that thing that called itself her brother, had not looked on her with malice or compassion, just with surgical calculation. And for a being like Annabella, once worshipped and revered, that kind of cold erasure might have cut deeper than chains ever could. The temple's systems remained active. The altar hummed softly. The band on my wrist still pulsed, and I could feel it sinking with something buried in the stone around me. Not hostile, curious. I let it scan me, respond to my presence, offer small flickers of warmth and comfort as I touched the altar's surface. I wasn't one of them, not divine, not shaped by energy and purpose, but I mattered here because she had said I did, and the systems believed her. When she finally stirred, she didn't speak at first, just blinked up at the ceiling and sighed, long and low, like someone who had finally woken from a nightmare they weren't sure was over. I reached for her hand, not to comfort her, but just to remind her she wasn't alone. She laced her fingers through mine without looking. When she finally did, her voice was quieter than usual. "He wasn't supposed to hesitate." "He didn't seem sure," I replied. "Maybe he expected you to be angrier. Maybe he thought you'd lash out." She shook her head slowly. "No, he expected me to be broken. What scared him was that I was." I helped her sit upright. Her balance returned quickly, and the light in her body began to glow steadier again. "So what happens now?" I asked. "You said this wasn't a war, but he didn't look like someone who's done talking." "No," she said, rising slowly to her feet. "He'll return with others, and next time they won't hesitate, but he gave us something we didn't have before." "What?" "Time," she said simply. "Time to awaken the rest of what's buried here." She didn't mean more weapons, not exactly. As we moved deeper into the sanctum beneath the ravine, the true nature of the temple began to reveal itself, not as a shrine to power, but as a vault of memory. She guided me past sealed chambers, each unlocking with a simple word from her lips, each opening into visions of what her people once were. Holograms of cities in the sky, winged beings walking among mortals with grace instead of pride, energy flowing not to dominate but to nurture. She paused at each one, sometimes starring in silence, sometimes whispering names I didn't recognize. They weren't mournful whispers. They were honoring whispers like a priest nominating the fallen. "What happened to them?" I asked, as we passed a mural carved into the wall, depicting a council with Annabella standing defiant at the center. "They divided," she said, "not in body but in thought. Some of us believed we were guardians, meant to protect and guide to build bridges with mortals. Others believed we were rulers. They wanted worship, structure, obedience. I gave the mortals access to energy freely, without cost, without control. That terrified them." "So they betrayed you?" "Yes," she said. "But it wasn't just about power. It was about fear that I'd tip the balance. Fear that mortals might one day not need gods at all." We entered what looked like a command chamber, half war room, half spiritual archive. The center displayed a star map, rotating slowly, showing shifting territories and glowing signals. She touched a node and it pulsed. A smaller projection appeared, showing scattered ruins across the sector, temples like this one, buried or destroyed. "There are still sites like this?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, "dormant, unseen, but tied to me. If I can awaken them, they will help shield us, help us speak, not just to them, but to the stars." I saw it then. This wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't even about survival. Annabella wasn't planning to fight a war. She was planning to wake a memory, to reignite a forgotten truth, one that could rewrite the balance her former brethren had imposed. But I also saw the risk. If they caught her before she reached the others, if they destroyed this temple before she could spread her signal, then she'd vanish all over again, this time for good. "I'll help you find them," I said without hesitation. "We'll bring the others back online. We'll build something they can't erase." She turned to me and took both my hands. Her eyes weren't glowing then. They were just eyes. Tired, hopeful, real. "You already have. Every step we take together, I feel less like a relic and more like myself." There were no romantic words, no dramatic gestures. But when she leaned in and pressed her forehead to mine, it wasn't godly or grand. It was intimate, grounded. The bond between us was no longer one of pact or promise. It was choice, again and again. And I realized then that I didn't just want to protect her. I wanted to build with her, even if the whole galaxy stood against us. Outside, the storm clouds were gathering again. The stars were dimmer. The silence above was heavy. But within the temple walls, something stirred. The systems were waking, the pulse of the old ways reborn. And at the center of it, hand in hand, stood a goddess no longer forgotten, and a man who had once wandered without purpose, but now had everything to fight for. We left the ravine before the next dusk cycle, the air charged and thick with the scent of coming conflict. The sky above had darkened unnaturally, not from any natural weather, but from the slow and deliberate return of eyes once diverted. Annabella walked ahead, her stride steady, and her expression unreadable. The star map embedded into the band on my wrist pulsed faintly, guiding us west across the shattered plains to the next signal node, one of the old temples buried beneath fractured tectonics. We moved in silence most of the time, not because there was nothing to say, but because every word felt borrowed from the calm before the inevitable storm. The terrain was worse out here, more broken, as if the world itself had been punished for once sheltering her. Spires of black stone jutted from the crust like broken teeth, and rivers of inert crystal marked fault lines that ran in impossible directions. But the signal remained strong, and the closer we got, the more Annabella seemed to grow into herself. Her glow wasn't constant anymore. It flared and pulsed with rhythm, as if each step toward the old power awakened something in her bones, something ancient and once buried that was no longer interested in being silent. When we reached the site, the ground opened like it had been waiting. A spiral of stairs formed from the earth itself, leading down into the remnants of a sanctuary swallowed by time. We descended together, and this time she didn't need to speak a word. The place recognized her instantly. Light returned to systems untouched for millennia. Floating obelisks rose into position. The air vibrated with the music of old rituals, tones that weren't audible but felt through the skin and blood. The sanctuary came alive not in defense but in welcome. She stood at the center, arms outstretched as glyphs wrapped around her in slow spirals. I stood just beyond the platform, watching my hand on the band around my wrist as it synced to the new frequency. Then something strange happened. The system responded to me directly. My thoughts, my memories. It wasn't invasive, not like the probes I'd seen used by AI security on other worlds. This was curious, it asked. Not took, it offered. And I let it in. Suddenly the walls flickered and bloomed with new light. Holograms formed not of her past but of mine, my childhood, my wandering. The first time I stepped aboard a derelict freighter with nothing but a second-hand scanner and a dream of finding something bigger than myself. I felt exposed at first, but then I understood. This was the sanctuary recognizing why I had stayed, why I had promised, not because of her power, not because she needed saving, but because I had needed to belong, and in her, I'd finally found that place. Annabella's eyes opened slowly, and for the first time since I'd met her, they shimmered, not with energy, but with tears. "It chose you too," she said, voice low. "Not as a vessel, not as a proxy, as a partner. This place doesn't lie. It doesn't manipulate. It sees what is." I stepped forward and the glyphs didn't resist me. They opened space for me beside her. I stood next to her shoulder to shoulder, and in that moment, the sanctuary broadcast its first signal in 10,000 years. It was not a call to arms. It was a call to memory, a reawakening, a reminder to every listening system, every remnant of her old world, still humming beneath distant soils, that Annabella was not gone, that her truth had not been erased, that she was not alone. Far above, we felt the response almost instantly. A ripple of energy moved through the air, distant and subtle like a pebble dropped into an ocean. One by one, distant nodes acknowledged the beacon, some faint, some weak, some nearly snuffed out but alive, and as each responded, Annabella stood straighter, brighter. She looked at me like she was seeing the galaxy realign for the first time. But the moment fractured when the floor trembled, not from the sanctuary's energy, but from something approaching fast. Outside light erupted in the sky, not gold, not white, but red. A drop pod tore through the clouds, trailing infernal streaks behind it, and when it struck the earth above us, the impact cracked the surface open. The old stone groaned and a secondary wave of energy pulsed outward, corrupt, artificial, wrong. We rushed up the stairwell together, and when we reached the mouth of the sanctuary, the world was already on fire. The pod had opened. Not like the previous divine constructs, this one had no grace, no symmetry. It was raw metal twisted into shape designed for one purpose: destruction. From within, a creature emerged, once divine, now twisted. A former god turned in force her, corrupted by whatever dark power the remaining pantheon now wielded. Annabella stood tall. They sent her. "Who is she?" I asked, already bracing for the worst. "She was my sister, before she traded her soul for absolution." The creature moved fast. Its form flickered between solid and molten, limbs like blades, voice a shriek of overlapping echoes. It didn't speak, it attacked. Annabella caught the first strike with her bare hand, the shockwave blasting apart the nearest stone pillars. I dove to the side as they clashed divine energy against corrupted fire, the ground shattering beneath them. She fought with elegance, but not without cost. Her opponent was not trying to win, she was trying to break. I watched for an opening, knowing I was no warrior, but also knowing I couldn't just stand by. I reached into the sanctuary's interface, my band glowing hot, and mentally called for help. The system answered, feeding me coordinates, plans, blueprints for a countermeasure hidden within the sanctuary's core. I moved fast, heart pounding, dodging falling debris and bursts of heat as the two gods tore the air apart. At the base of the sanctuary's root was a containment glyph meant for stabilizing power surges. I rewired it, reversed its polarity, and aimed it at the corrupted god's trajectory. The moment she launched at Annabella again, I triggered it. The trap activated. Light formed a net around the attacker, locking her midair, not harming her, just freezing her momentum. Annabella didn't waste the moment. She surged forward, struck her sister's chest with both palms, and the corrupted god collapsed in a burst of expelled energy, the red light vanishing into the dust. Annabella dropped to her knees beside the fallen form. There was no triumph in her face, only sorrow. She's not gone, just asleep. I knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder, one more spared, one more who might come back. She looked at me exhausted but grateful. "You keep saving me," she whispered. "No," I said. "We keep saving each other." We didn't leave the sanctuary that night. The corrupted god, Annabella's sister, remained unconscious beneath a stasis field powered by the ancient systems that still thrummed with energy around us. She no longer looked like the creature that had emerged from the pod. Her body, stripped of rage and flame, resembled Annabella in a way that was both tragic and haunting. The glow that pulsed through her veins was dull, flickering like a dying star. I could feel the conflict radiating from Annabella's presence, anger at what her sister had become, sorrow for the life that had been stolen, and a hint of fragile hope that somewhere beneath all the damage, the one she remembered might still remain. I sat beside her on the edge of the platform, my legs aching, my eyes gritty from smoke and strain, but my mind locked on the decision we both knew was approaching. The Pantheon had stopped observing. They were intervening now. One sibling had come, another would follow, and the next one might not hesitate to burn this world from orbit, to silence her voice again. And yet, she had not fought to destroy. She had fought to awaken, to defend, to shield, not just herself, but the echoes of what her people once were. That distinction mattered. It gave her something her enemies didn't understand. It gave us a reason. Annabella finally spoke, her voice low. There were 5 of us at the beginning. I was the second born. She, the one you saw, was the youngest. Her name was Mura. She believed most fiercely in unity, in balance, and yet she was the first to fall when the doctrine turned into a cage. I looked over at Mura's resting form, and now. She's not beyond saving, Annabella said. But she's not safe either. When she wakes, she may not remember mercy. We have to decide whether we bind her again or trust that the light inside her isn't gone. I didn't have the answer, but I knew what she was really asking. What kind of future are we building here? A future driven by fear and defense, or one shaped by the possibility of redemption? I didn't come all this way to watch Annabella become the same thing she was fighting. I put my hand gently over hers. Then we try. We hold the line not just for survival, but for the chance that even those broken can be reached, even if it's hard. She nodded once, and I saw the tension ease in her shoulders. We spent the next few hours repairing the sanctuary's outer ring, linking its signal system to the previously activated Ravine Temple. With both nodes pooling in tandem, the star map in my wristband expanded, marking new coordinates across the sector. It wasn't just territory, it was memory reasserting itself. A lost civilization clawing its way back into relevance through the efforts of the last one who still believed in it. I watched her work, commanding the old tech like an extension of her body, not dominating it, but communing with it. She was not a queen demanding tribute. She was a bridge between what was and what could be. At dawn, though the light never truly changed on this world, she joined me outside the sanctuary walls. The winds had settled, the smoke had thinned. Above us, stars blinked faintly through the broken sky. She stood beside me without speaking, letting the silence settle in. Then, slowly, she reached for my hand and laced her fingers through mine again. There was no ceremony in it, no divine light, just warmth, presence. A moment shared between equals. I used to think immortality was the curse, she said. Living on while others faded, watching the world change in ways you couldn't control, but now I see it differently. The curse wasn't time, it was isolation, the lie that we had to endure it alone. You're not alone now, I said simply. I know, she whispered, and because of that, I finally believe we can win. Suddenly, the sanctuary pulsed with alarm, not a threat, an arrival. A new beacon had come online. One of the distant nodes had responded, and not just an echo it had awakened. Annabella's eyes widened, and she led me back into the main chamber. A projection flared to life, showing a tower buried in the ruins of a dead moon, its energy signature strong, its system still intact. But there was more someone inside. "It can't be," she muttered. "That tower was sealed long before my exile." "Who's there?" "Someone who stayed behind." We didn't wait. The coordinates locked into the temple's system. Annabella activated a transport platform that hadn't been operational for centuries, one that bent space through folded corridors, divine shortcuts only she could walk. But this time she reached for me. "You're coming too," she said. "We go together." The moment we stepped into the fold, I felt the universe ripple around us, like stepping between the pages of a story written by something older than time. When we emerged, we stood on the cracked surface of a barren moon, windless and silent, with the tower rising like a defiant monument against the void. Its gates opened before us, no resistance, no challenge, just invitation. Inside we found her, another of the 5. She sat on a throne of broken crystal, her body dim but intact, her eyes closed as if in meditation, but the moment Annabella entered, her eyes opened. No malice, no hostility, just recognition. "Annabella," she said, her voice like stone ground smooth by time. Annabella froze, searing. "You survived." "I endured." Searing stood slowly, her limbs crackling with age and power. She looked at me, then at the band on my wrist, and smiled faintly. "You did more than endure. You grew, and you found an anchor." "I found a partner," Annabella corrected. The 2 sisters embraced, not as soldiers or gods, but as family long divided by betrayal. Searing stepped back and looked out the shattered window of her tower. "The others will come, the ones who never doubted the purge. They will burn this place if they can." "Then we stand," Annabella said, together. Searing turned to me and spoke with quiet clarity. "Then we all do." And with that, the final stage of our journey began, not just to survive but to restore. Not through war, but through unity built on truth, defiance, and the kind of love that doesn't come from worship, but from standing side by side through the fire. The final confrontation didn't arrive in the form of a fleet, nor with the thunder of warships blotting out the sky. It came as a convergence, a slow and terrible tightening of the galaxy around us. Word had spread through the old networks. Temples were waking, nodes long dead now pulsed with soft light, and above them old watchers stirred. Annabella and Searing worked tirelessly, linking more of the ancient sites, reactivating the song of their kind across worlds that had long forgotten their names. I helped where I could, not just as a bystander, but as a vital tether. The systems responded faster with my presence. They recognized that this was not just divine reclamation, it was alliance, it was trust. And at the heart of it, love had become a signal stronger than any code etched into stone. We returned to the ravine for the final stand, not because it was where the first chain broke, but because it was where Annabella had first spoken the truth aloud, that she didn't want followers, only someone who chose her freely. Mura was there, awake now, and slowly healing. The corruption had left her body, but she was quiet, uncertain, reluctant to rejoin the world she had once tried to destroy. Searing stayed at her side, guiding her like the elder she was. No judgment, just patience. Even the sanctuary had softened toward her. The world could change, it seemed. Even the divine weren't beyond redemption. On the day they came, there was no warning flare, no sirens. The sky simply shifted, the stars above dimmed and rippled as something massive folded through space. A presence descended, not mechanical, not even physical in the traditional sense, but conceptual. A manifestation of the old order's will projected through the last of the corrupted gods, 3 of them. The remaining members of the 5, Annabella's one's brothers. They floated above the ravine, cloaked in silver and logic, forms shimmering with cold light, not furious, not hateful, just final. "You've defied the seal," the one in the center said. "You've rekindled blasphemy." "I've remembered the truth," Annabella replied, stepping forward, no longer flinching beneath their presence. "And so have the worlds. The galaxy cannot be trusted with freedom." "You don't protect the galaxy," she said. "You hoard it." They descended in unison, their voices merging into a resonance that cracked the stone beneath our feet. "Then you will be unmade." I stepped beside her, and Searing did too. Then, to our surprise, Mura rose next to us as well. Her eyes were dim, but clear. She looked at her brothers and said nothing, only stood her ground. Annabella reached for my hand, fingers lacing with mine, and something shifted in the air. Not power, choice, and the systems responded. The sanctuaries across the sector flared simultaneously. From orbit, they must have looked like a chain of suns reigniting after eons of silence. The divine network cracked under the strain of the light it carried for too long. The old programming faltered. The artificial balance they had enforced began to dissolve in the presence of something they hadn't accounted for: unity born without coercion, power shared, not imposed. The three gods moved to strike, but the world itself rejected them. The energy they called upon fractured, the glyphs beneath their feet destabilized, the voices they used to command obedience found no ears willing to listen, and then they simply unraveled, not destroyed, not slain, just forgotten. The very systems that once carried their essence now rejected it like a virus finally purged. The pantheon ended not in blood or fire, but in silence. We stood at the center of the ravine, breathing in the quiet. No war, no explosions, just the soft hum of the old temples humming in peace. Annabella looked up, and for the first time since I'd met her, her body no longer pulsed with strain or restraint. The glow within her was calm, not burning. Her form shimmered briefly and then settled, less god now, more woman, still powerful, still divine, but free. "I didn't think it would end like this," she said softly. "No one ever does," I said. We walked the edges of the old sanctuary, now fully restored, and watched as Searing and Mura reconnected with the places they once guarded. The world felt lighter, brighter, even though no sun pierced the sky. Annabella and I stepped into what had once been her chamber of isolation, now reborn as a place of rest. The chains that once held her were gone, replaced with a garden of soft light and growing things, seeded by the temple systems in response to the harmony we'd created. She turned to me then, hands on my shoulders, eyes searching mine, not for answers but for something much simpler. "Do you regret it?" she asked, finding me choosing me. I didn't even blink, not for a single second. Her lips curved, even knowing you gave up a quiet life. "I didn't give it up," I said, pulling her gently closer. "I traded it for something real, for someone real, for a future that means something." She kissed me then. No magic, no divine storm, just her mouth on mine, her fingers threading into my hair, her body warm and steady against me, and in that kiss everything settled. The past, the pain, the chains, all of it melted into the simple truth that I loved her, not because she was powerful or beautiful or chosen, but because she saw me when no one else had, and I had stayed not because I was bound but because I wanted to. The galaxy would remember her now, not as a fallen goddess, not as a threat, but as a light that refused to go out. Her story wasn't written in temples anymore. It was written in the hands we held, the promises we kept, and the lives we chose to build. And for the first time, the universe was quiet, not because it was afraid, but because it was listening. Together, we stepped into the future, and we didn't look back.